In this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast, we are going across the pond to talk about some of the top international prospects in the 2025 NBA Draft who made their season debuts over the last few days. Stay tuned to hear about Nolan Traore, Noa Essengue, Ben Saraf, and Hugo Gonzalez. And we got one special prospect that we're going to talk about at the end of the podcast. Stay tuned. Big shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Rafael Barlowe. Got my man, NBA Draft Point, Alec Kichian. Again, this is his third podcast with us. We've talked about some of the younger international prospects, but this week, or this episode, we're going to talk about the debuts of some of the top prospects who made their first game or their first appearance this week. But before we get into this episode, I want to let you know that it is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And if you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, please subscribe because we are here for you every day, 5 days a week at the minimum. Like, share, comment, subscribe. Make sure that you click the bell so you can be notified every time you drop, because basketball season is here, which means, again, 5 days a week, if not more, from the Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast crew. All right, let's get started. Like I mentioned in the open, we're going across the pond. We're going to talk about some of the top international guys. The international season has already started. We still got about maybe around 30 days, a little less until the NBA season starts. Training camp, I believe, starts next week. I know the Mavs have their media day on Monday, so I'm looking forward to that. College basketball, they just started. They had their first official practice yesterday. But overseas, they're already playing. I mean, they had the NBL Blitz in Australia. Their season has started. And some of the top guys who may be lottery picks from the international ranks played. And let's start off with Nolan Traore. He had a rough start. 1 for 9 from the floor. They did win. They beat Monaco without Mike James. What were your overall thoughts on his performance?
So personally, I don't let one performance completely sway me one way or the other. We saw him play for Saint-Quentin last year. He was on loan from Asvel, I believe, but he did play with Saint-Quentin for a while, and he averaged like 10 points, 5 assists, decent shooting. And this year he comes back as a more prominent piece, but I mean he did struggle in his first game. They defended him really well. They double teamed him a lot, something that I did notice. And the one thing I noticed that kind of got to me was the ability to use his left and how a lot of his drives towards the left ended up in turnovers. I think he had 4 turnovers, and 3 of them were from drives that went to the left. That might be a concern going forward, but I mean, it was less than ideal for a debut of the season.
What was like the biggest takeaway outside of the left from that performance?
Well, I mean, the shooting. I mean, he went 1 for 9. That's never great. He went 1 for 2 from 3. I mean, and then he got benched for a big part of the second half, or the third quarter, or the fourth quarter, I believe. But I think after he got his third or fourth turnover, he got benched for a big chunk of the second half. So I think it's just growing pains, just kind of getting used to this new role that he's in, getting used to the new team he's around. Like I said, the team won, but now he's getting used to being one of the main guys on the team. He's gonna get game planned around more. You have guys targeting him a lot. Like I said, like he was getting double teamed a ton, and from stronger, big defenders. So I think they even switched to big on him at some point. So that's one thing I did notice while watching the tape of his game.
Yeah, and there's added pressure. You know, he's like you said, last year he was on loan. This year, he's the guy that people are talking about as, potential top 5 pick. And his name is on top of the scouting report, and everybody's probably going to game plan against him. They did get the win. I mean, Mike James didn't play. What were some of the positives that you saw?
Kind of the opportunities he had to kind of shoot, like the shots didn't go in. but the opportunities to shoot, especially from three, weren't terrible. I think like once he starts hitting those, it'll look a lot better. I think again, like the driving left was an issue, but once he drives right, the driving kick, he had this nice pass when he was, I think he was driving right, and then he kicked it to the corner. That looked really good for an open three. And I think although he did have some turnover issues and they were forcing him a lot, I think the playmaking is something that's gonna keep his name up there, you know. And the shot did like it didn't go in, but the looks were there. And I think once he just kind of gets used to the new role, once he kind of gets used to the defenses and the new coverages, I think he'll be all right.
Coming into this season, what were some of the concerns that you had? Like for me, I thought that he was dynamic as far as getting to the rim. I didn't think that he was a great finisher. I thought that the shooting was probably going to be what maybe makes or breaks his draft range. I felt like if he had a good year shooting the three or shooting pull-ups, then I thought, I mean, the sky's the limit. He can go inside the top five. But I also felt like if he struggled shooting, then that would definitely like raise some eyebrows and it could impact his draft range. So for you, what were your biggest concerns coming into this season?
So yeah, the finishing at the rim and just the strength kind of were the kind of big factors. Like you said, he's good at getting to the rim, but the finishing is gonna be a lot more difficult. Like if you were seeing the struggles in U18 competition, then against grown men and good teams and things like Monaco was a great team, and they have some like seasoned vets on their team. And I think the added pressure of these games being better players, stronger players, bigger players, I think that was my kind of big concern going in. And I mean, we did see it a bit, but again, I think once the more he plays, the more we'll kind of be able to make some decisions about that. Because again, like we're gonna talk about Ben Saraf later. I don't take one game personally as a make or break thing for me,
Yeah.
even though Ben Saraf would look good.
So here's a question, and for the listeners out there that are not familiar with Nolan's game, and they may say, all right, if he has struggled shooting and he's not a great finisher, why is he so highly regarded?
Well, first off, playmaking is special for me. That's the one thing that kind of separates him from some of the other top guards in this class, is how good of a playmaker he is, how good he prioritizes helping his teammates out, making the smart move, making the right move. Today, obviously, it didn't go in, but usually the very smart player. The getting to the rim, the athleticism is good, like for his size. Like he's not a superb athlete, but he moves fast, he moves quick, and he's dynamic off the dribble. So I that's kind of what I would say from him. I think the playmaking is the big separator. Is that how much, let's say in France for playing in the U18s, how much he prioritized being the main handler, being the main playmaker, helping to get some of these other guys involved, specifically Noa Essengue, who was a running mate in the U18s. I think the connection he had with his bigs was really good, and that's kind of what keeps his name in the mix or got his name up in the to start with.
Let's say I'm a skeptic, right? And it's unfortunate, but here NBA Big Boy, we keep it real. There are a lot of people that like to compare prospects to other prospects based off of where they're from. A French prospect is going to be compared to a French prospect. What separates him, or what's different from him than a Killian Hayes or Frank Ntilikina, guys that were lottery picks as point guards from France that people were high on?
I knew that one was coming when you started talking about different point guards from France. I think just the amount of success he's had as a pro with skills that can like actually translate. I think Ntilikina, he was a good defender. He was also a good scorer, but he was a good defender specifically. Nolan, again, the playmaking is what separates him a bit. He's played his fair share of competitions overseas. He's played in the States a bit for the Hoop Summit, I believe.
Yeah.
And just in general, just seeing him kind of get to that level, he broke the record in ANGT, or almost broke a record of points in ANGT, and just being able to kind of like do everything or for an offense, kind of put him aside for me or split it. Yeah.
Yeah, I know that's the question that you're going to hear a lot. I was high on Killian Hayes coming into the draft. I thought that I think I had him as a top 5 pick or even higher. I didn't know that he didn't go right, but I thought maybe he could be like a D'Angelo Russell type player as far as not being the best athlete. I thought the shot would come along, and he just hasn't looked confident in the NBA as far as just like going up against athletes. And so, I mean, he's holding on. He's barely holding on. He has an opportunity with the Nets. He just signed with the Brooklyn Nets to kind of save his career. All right, when we return to the second segment, we're going to talk about two guys that play for the team that Killian Hayes played for coming into the NBA draft. We're going to talk about Ben Saraf, who, unlike Nolan Traore, had a big debut, scored 21 points. Then we're going to talk about French prospect Noa Essengue, who also had 15 points and 2 steals in his debut. But before we get into the second segment, I want to talk to you about my favorite app when it comes to purchasing tickets, and that is Game Time. Why do I like the Game Time app? Simply because it makes it very easy and simple to purchase tickets to sporting events, concerts, comedy, theater, or more. They have all-in pricing. All you have to do is toggle this feature, and you can see the total upfront, and there's no surprise fees at checkout. And then you get a panoramic view of your seat in the app before you buy, so you know exactly where you're sitting. You know the view. You know, again, where you're sitting. No surprises there. And then Game Time has the lowest price guarantee. If it's not the lowest price, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Now, terms apply. Again, all you have to do is create an account, use the redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Once again, thank you for making the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. Now, for your second listen, check out the Locked On NBA podcast, because there's no offseason in the NBA, and Locked On NBA provides daily basketball analysis from the national and local experts, and you get it in 30 minutes or less. No one keeps you as informed and as entertained as Locked On NBA. It is available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. All right, let's talk about Ben Saraf, probably the hottest name, arguably. Some people may say Nolan Traore, but Ben Saraf probably made the most of his summer as far as improving his draft stock. Averaged 28 points a game. Was it the under 18s?
Yeah, it was the under 18s.
Yeah, I saw so many tournaments. There was like a U17s, U18s. I was great saying my mind, U19s, but the U19s is next year. Averaged 28 points a game, was dominant, great size, and his success from the summer carried over with his debut for Ulm. What were your thoughts on Ben Saraf?
I mean, I think he looked pretty damn good. And like, he had the best possible debut you can have as a prospect. He looked dynamic. And just before we start, I don't watch much of the German league, but it's very, very fast paced, very athletic league. The highlights of that game were ridiculous. So I would check out the highlights of that game, because it was really cool game. And he just looked really comfortable, really good. He went 2 of 4 from 3. One of them was a catch and shoot in the corner. The other one was this jab step pump fake straight in the defender's face on the top of the key. And he just had some really, like, he showed everything in his bag. Like, he went to the rim, he drove to the rim, took some contact, he shot off balance one time. He showed all of his, like, his length, all of his, like, the herky jerky type of offense that he has. And once again showed how great he was in isolation. I think that's the main sell with him, is the ISO scoring.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like he just picked up where he left off. I saw him at Basketball Without Borders, and I thought he looked good. I wonder, like, if you're like Neokolis Avdalis, a Greek point guard who I thought were pretty similar. If you're Avdalis, are you looking at Ben Saraf's situation thinking like, man, that could be me, because they both have good size. I think Abdallah is a better athlete. But again, I thought they were really similar. But right now, I mean, Ben Saraf he's definitely in the conversations as a first round pick in the 2025 NBA draft. But that's not something that we were hearing 3 or 4 months ago. I know it's asking a lot for him to maintain this, but do you think he could be like this year's Nikola Topic, a guy that entered the season with a little bit of buzz, not, a lottery pick on different draft boards, but climbs up into the discussion? Because I thought Topic could have been a top 5 pick if he would have stayed healthy. But do you think Saraf could be this year's Topic?
Well, I think if he continues this way and he plays this way, I mean, again, you said it's a hard ask, but if he plays this way for the rest of the season, then I think it's definitely a possibility. Personally, I'm not exactly there yet. I'm gonna wait to see a few more games, but he looked as dynamic as he could. And I think that if he did continue playing like this, if these are the minutes that he's getting consistently, even if they get into once they get into harder competition, because I know that the team they played against was a good team, but once they get into deeper into the season, if they continues getting minutes like this and he keeps playing this way, I think it's definitely a possibility.
Yeah, I just thought about it. I mean, there are some similarities. Topic had a monster Adidas Next Generation tournament in the spring. And I mean, I think he had like a 40-point game or something like that. Just put up some big numbers. And then he actually led Serbia to the U18 championships. I think they beat Spain in the championship. And again, he had a little bit of buzz. I was familiar with him because I had saw him play at some ANGTs the year before. He definitely wasn't someone that I had on my radar as a first round pick. I thought second round pick. I actually thought he would be a guy that we would probably be talking a little bit more about in the 2025 draft. Burst up on the scene, get into the rack whenever he wanted. And unfortunately, he had the knee injury. Then he came back, got hurt again. Like I said, I think he would have been a top 5, or at least he wasn't a lottery, but I thought he would have went higher if it weren't for the injury. And it just seemed like Saraf is having a little bit of the same. I mean, there's some similarities, I should say. Took off this summer and then, got off to a good start. I think the German league. I just thought about that. Is the German league tougher than the ABA? I guess that's debatable, but I think there could be some similarities. I want to talk about his teammate, Noa Essengue, a guy that I've had a chance to watch live a few times. He absolutely dominated the Adidas Next Generation tournament in Dubai that I went to, and he had a good debut, 15 points, 2 steals, 6'10", long, athletic. What were your thoughts about his performance?
I mean, for me, Noah's a guy that I've always been a bit on the fences about just because I'm not exactly sure what position he is or what I would consider him as. I think in FIBA, they used him as a big man and he looked really good. He looked dominant. In ANGT, he was more of a forward, I think. He shot the three a lot, but was really inefficient. Like one of the biggest green lights that I've seen watching international basketball so far is Noah during I don't remember if it was the first or the second, if it was the final or was the prelims, but he just kept shooting the ball from 3 and just wasn't hitting it, which I mean, if he can get that in his bag, I think that again, that's the separator. For Ulm, he was playing more as a forward. And I mean, the one thing you notice is that he had no rebounds this game,
Yeah.
with rebounds being usually his bread and butter, usually the rebound magnet. But apart from that, I mean, he did look good. I think in the beginning, he looked a bit uncomfortable. He looked like the game was maybe a bit fast for him. But as the game went on, he got more and more comfortable. He had this strip steal and a dunk. He had a few big dunks. He had 1 of 3 from 3, which, I mean, that's a
Good
good
sign for
sign.
him. Yeah.
That's a good sign, definitely. But if he, like I said, if he can continue, or if he can find his role within this offense and stay in that role for the whole season, I think then we'll kind of see more what type of prospect he is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, he's very interesting. He's got good size. He's athletic. I get it. You don't know if he's a 4 or a 3. You will want him to be a 3, but he doesn't necessarily shoot the ball. well enough to be a 3. He's really, really thin. And so, that could be issues playing the 4. I'm high on him. One, simply because he's born in late 2006. He could easily be 2007. I think if he were born like 2 weeks later or something like that, maybe even less than that, he wouldn't even be eligible for this class. So he does have time to bulk up. He's been productive without a jump shot. And now the way I look at it is like, all right, you just figure like if you can get him to shoot jumpers, then it opens up a lot of his game. But he normally just kind of scores off activity, his athleticism, rebounds, and I just think the upside is high for him as this switchy defender that can guard all over the floor. But the 0 rebounds was pretty interesting, considering that a lot of his dominance on the youth levels has been with his activity, cleaning the glass, offensive rebounds, and so on. So I thought he had a pretty good debut. All right, when we return, this is a subject me and my brother talked about, I guess maybe about a week ago. Hugo Gonzalez, who is a highly touted prospect from Spain. Some people think he's the best Spanish prospect since Ricky Rubio, and he had a DNP-CD this week. And I don't even know if there's a clear path for him to get a lot of playing time. So me and Alec are going to talk about Hugo Gonzalez. Then there's one more surprise prospect that we want to cover. But before we get into the last segment, we have to talk about FanDuel. Why? Because FanDuel is America's #1 sports book. And if you are an NFL fan, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, which is America's #1 sports book. But they got something new. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, now you can check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. And all you have to do is place your first $5 bet. And that is on FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Right. Hugo Gonzalez, DNP, didn't play. I wouldn't say that's shocking or a big surprise. But how do you think staying with Real Madrid could impact his draft status? Or do you think they may send him on loan? It's a tricky situation. What are your thoughts on that?
So for him, the main concern this whole summer was the shooting. And obviously, if he can't hit shots, he's not going to get playing time. And it's unfortunate because he is really talented. I believe he is applied for a loan, but I'm not 100% sure if he'll be eligible because it is a bit late into the season. But with him, they kept him around. Obviously, like from their whole crop of guys, it seems like he was the one they were prioritizing. He was their star, but everybody else that was on their star-studded U18 team isn't on their senior team a bit for a reason.
Yep.
This guy, they kept him around because he's big, he's athletic, he has the size to defend, but he is really far down in the depth chart. And with a ton of proven veterans, tons of guys who have played in the NBA, played in the EuroLeague, played for a long time, that play at his position too. Like if you scroll through the Real Madrid website and you look at wings, there's like maybe 5 guys until you get him.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, so that's kind of the issue that he's gonna kind of have kind of cracking the rotation and maybe get him solid minutes. So for his sake, I hope he does go on loan just so he can kind of get the reps he needs to stay a top prospect. But if not, I know he has some offers to play in college, and those look real good right now. So one game is a bit like I don't want to count him out again after one game, but we'll have to see how the season goes around.
Yeah, I agree. And that's the difficulty with scouting international prospects that come up through a Real Madrid or Barcelona or so on. And I know like last year I went to Real Madrid. I went to Madrid to scout and evaluate. And of course, Hugo was the #1 name on the list that I wanted to see. And so I go to their under 18 team game and he doesn't play because somebody on the senior team was injured and they needed him to suit up. So I missed that opportunity to go see him play. The next day I go to the Real Madrid senior team game. I think they played Zalgiris and he doesn't play. So I spend like 4 or 5 days in Madrid. I didn't get a chance to see him play or practice because I didn't have access to see the senior team practice. But I saw the U18 team practice, saw them play 2 games and a practice, saw 0 of Hugo. Now I'm independent, so it's not like, you know, I'm on the NBA payroll where if they pay me to go out there and the guy doesn't play, then, you know, it's it's all good. It's not my money. But I was disappointed. But again, their U18 team was loaded. I got a chance to see Igor play. I got a chance to see some other guys play. And then it's always fun going to a EuroLeague game, even though EuroLeague games in Spain aren't like going to EuroLeague games in Turkey or Serbia or Greece. If I had to choose like an atmosphere, I would definitely choose one of those places over Spain, even though the basketball in Spain is really good. But I just didn't get a chance to see him play. And I think that that could be something that is pretty common this year, that NBA scouts will go to games and they're going to be limited, possibly, unless something changes, to just watching him practice and warm up. I know I had a similar situation a couple years ago. I went to watch Tristan Vucevic. Anyway, he's playing for the Wizards. Went to watch him play, and I've told this story before. And he got in with like a minute and a half left in the second quarter, so somebody else wouldn't get in foul trouble, and that was all that he played. And then they ended up, I guess, transferring him to Partizan. He got a few minutes there. But that's the risk that you take with these guys that are coming up in like some of these powerhouse European programs. And Hugo is a guy that I could see why they would favor him. He's been with the team a long time. I told my brother in the last podcast when I went to Real Madrid's facility, they had this huge wall. And I think it was probably from the 2000, I guess was the year they won the EuroLeague. So that would have been the 17-18 season. And they had this massive picture on the wall, and it had everybody from their senior team to their youth teams. So you had Luka in the picture, and then you had, you know, Sergio Llull, you had just all the guys on that team. And then there's like little kids, and Hugo's in the picture. He could not have been no more than, I'm guessing, 8 or 9 years old. So he's been with them for a long time. Juan Nunez was in the picture. But Hugo's the guy that they're prioritizing, and I'm guessing that he has a significant buyout, which could be beneficial for them. But it's going to be difficult scouting him.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I just hope we get to see him more because he is a talented player. He's one of the more talented players. Like we saw him in ANGT, he was amazing. For Spain this year, he was on and off, but he's a great prospect, and I hope we do get to see him at least improve through the ranks. If he doesn't get it on loan, he gets more chances to learn through his mistakes. And I think overall he's a really talented player, so I hope we do continue to see him because I know a lot of people that are high on him.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be uphill battle simply because the biggest concern for him is the outside shooting, and he's going to have a totally different role from the U18 team where he's featured to on the senior team where he's going to have to knock down shots. And you know they're going to leave him open, and so he's going to have to knock down shots when he does get the opportunity to play. He'll probably get some time and some blowouts. I mean, you've seen in Spain 15, 16-year-olds getting some opportunities in ACB games, but I do think it is going to be an uphill battle for him. All right, last prospect. It's a guy that if you've been on social media, you've seen the highlights of this 7'3". Was he like 13?
Just turned 13.
7'3", 13-year-old playing in Canada. Give us his name and your thoughts on him. I know you're from the area. You've had a chance to watch him before. You actually told me about him a few weeks ago, and I didn't like take notes and pay attention. And then it hit me once I saw like 7'3", bringing the ball up and down the court. So tell us the background.
So yeah, he's from Montreal, and he's a guy that I kind of stumbled across doing some research on Canadian prospects. So I do want to get more into them. But I saw that he was at the Omax Prosper camp, and he was towering Prosper. Because the Omax Prosper is like 6'9", 6'10", something like that. And they say he's 13, and he's bigger than him. So I did talk to this trainer, and one thing that they did prioritize a lot, because if you do watch the tape, he's able to bring the ball down the court. He had a jumper. Well, he doesn't have a jumper, but he showed a jumper in one of the clips that I saw. And I mean, it's easy to look dominant playing against guys that are 4'9", but he did look like a lot more coordinated and a lot more flexible than somebody that's that size at that age usually would be. And that's something that his coach said that they were prioritizing his development for the last 2 years. He said that they were training his flexibility, his movements, his all that type of stuff. So I think it's a guy to keep an eye on, him and Mohamed Dabone, who are in the 2030 class, 2031.
2030.
But I thought it was interesting. I thought it was cool to kind of just reach out to a guy from my city and just be like, this guy might be next up. So
Yeah, his name is Jeremy. How do you pronounce it? Go.
I think it's Goye, something like that. Now we'll have to get more familiar with it as it gets older. But in Canada, actually, I believe he's playing high school basketball because high school we don't have middle school in Montreal. We just have high school from seventh grade to I believe 12, 13. I don't know how it goes for you guys, but basically he is playing older competition, so it's not like he's just playing little kids the whole time, but it's definitely a guy that we should keep an eye on long term.
Yes, remember the name. I'm gonna just say Goyer. Jeremy Goyer. Gohier. 7'3", 13. He was bringing the ball up, coordinated. I mean, I wouldn't say like he was an explosive athlete, but he was very coordinated, showed skills. Again, I only saw like clips, highlight. I didn't see the whole game. He could have stumbled and tripped 18 times. It didn't show up in the highlights. But from what I saw, the way he moved, he was handling the ball. He made one jump shot. He was dunking on like his tiptoes. And he was just nimble. And he looked like a kid. He looked like a kid. It wasn't a situation where he looked like he was 17 years old. And I was speaking with an NBA agent a few weeks back, and we were talking about like these really massive prospects. And one of the things that he said he looks out for is like giantism. And he was like, you know, sometimes these guys that are 7'4", 5 have like huge heads. And he's like, there's a form of giantism. And he's like, if you can find a 7'3", 7'4" guy, which are already like extremely rare, but has normal like people features, like smaller face, he was like, you may have something there as far as just you know, just the way they move. And he was like, usually if a guy is like a giant with a massive head, he said they don't always move that well. So that was an interesting tidbit. But Jeremy Goyer, a name to remember. Well, that wraps up this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast. I think we're going to do this weekly overseas spotlight, where we're just going to discuss some of the, you know, the performances of some of the top international prospects, because even though this year is loaded in college basketball, I do think it is a pretty strong international class. But once again, thank you for making the Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast your first listen of the day. Check out the Locked On NBA Podcast, where the local experts will keep you updated every day with the biggest storylines ahead of the NBA season, which is around the corner. You can find Locked On NBA on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Once again, it's Rafael with Alex. I want to say Draft Point, NBA Draft Point, Alec, Kichian, and we are out of here.